We're very excited to have Richard Price tonight, writing as Harry Brandt. He's going to be reading from his new book, The Whites. Price is the author of 8 previous novels, including Lush Life and Clockers, and he's also written numerous screenplays and worked on the television show The Wire. The book's getting amazing coverage. I'm sure many of you saw the profile in this morning's Washington Post and profiled in the New York Times and landed on the cover of the New York Times Book Review. And the famously hard-to-please New York Times book critic confirmed what many of us already know from reading his work, which is that no one does dialogue quite like Richard Price, even when he's trying not to be Richard Price. No one has a better ear for street language than he does, and no one these days writes with more kinetic energy or more hard-boiled verb, the review said. His high-impact prose is the perfect tool for excavating the grisly horrors of urban life, and his ability to map his characters' inner lives, all the dreams and memories and wounds that make them tick, results in people who become as vivid to us as real-life relatives or friends. We're so pleased to have him here with us this evening for his first bookstore stop on his tour. Please help me welcome Richard Price.
Hello. Actually, I'm not going to be reading or talking about my book tonight, but the book I wrote under my other pen name, Little Black Dress. Here we go. Is this on? Yeah, okay. God. Okay. God, I gotta sit that close? All right. What can I tell you? I know what I can tell you. How do I start this? I'm going to read 3 sections, small sections, a lot of dialogue, very little King's English. The main character, Billy Graves, is a detective who's nearing retirement, and 20 years earlier, he was part of a young anti-crime squad that, in their salad days, ran riot all over the Bronx, and are now, other than Billy, they're all retired. And they all went into retirement with the one that got away, the one guy that committed an awful, heinous something, and either they couldn't prove it or the guy skated in court. And these guys continue to be obsessed with their one, who they call the Whites, as Ahab had his white. And this is Billy talking to one of the retired detective buddies of his about Billy's white. There's a guy named Curtis Taft. Now, what Curtis Taft had done was a woman broke up with him, a 28-year-old woman. He had a new girlfriend. One morning he decided just to walk over to his old girlfriend's house. In the house was the girlfriend, who's 28, her niece, who is 14, and a 4-year-old girl by another man. And he just shot the shit out of all of them, went home and got back in bed. And everybody Billy knows it's him. The whole world knows it's him, but everybody was scared of the guy and nobody would come forward. So the guy skated, and he's a security guard. In fact, during that time, he got promoted and married, and Billy is haunted by this guy, Curtis Taft. Can I tell you something? This is Billy talking. You talk about exorcisms. I never told this to anybody before, but embarrassed me. But about 6 months into trying to nail Curtis Taft, my wife convinced me to consult a psychic. Some old Italian lady, upstate New York. I was so desperate at that point. So I call her up, go to her house. I swear to God, she looked just like Casey Stengel. Hey, how you doing? Thanks for seeing me. I walk into the living room. The walls are covered with appreciation letters from different police departments around the country. Maybe a few from Canada, another from some town in Germany. It was pretty impressive until you go up close and read one. It has come to my attention, dear psychic, come to my attention that you might possibly have been of some assistance in the as yet unsolved homicide death of fill in the blank. Thank you for your time and enthusiasm. Sincerely, Elmo Butkus, Chief of Police, French Kiss, Indiana. But whatever, I'm there. I sit on the couch. She's in a rocking chair. I was told to bring some objects belonging to the victims. So I hand over a barrette belonging to the 4-year-old, a scarf from the 14-year-old, and Tanya Howard's Bible. Tanya Howard is being the girlfriend. I tell her what we think happened, Taft coming in there around sunrise, 3 shots and just walking out, going home, getting back in bed with his still asleep girlfriend. She says to me, okay, here's how it works. I'm going to sit here and think about what you just told me, and I'm going to get a little worked up, and I'll say things, a word, a phrase. You write everything down, whatever I say. And then she says, now the things I'll be saying, I don't know what any of it means. They're like pieces of a puzzle that you got to put together, okay? You're the detective, not me, okay? I say, okay. And oh, wait, she says, by the way, I never charge cops for helping them. That's my civic duty. All I ask in return is a letter from you on your police department stationery thanking me for my assistance. I say, yeah, sure, no problem. Let's go. And then she starts rocking in the chair, rubbing the 4-year-old's barrette, and lets it rip. 4 years old, that poor little kid. She never had a chance. She'll never see her mother again or play jump rope. That evil cocksucker, that fucking butter. I almost jumped out of the window. She shouted it so loud. But, okay, I write down butter. Then she's off again. What kind of cold-blooded scumbag would take the life of running water? Okay, writing it down, running water. I mean, everything in the world is near running water. A river, a sink, a sewer. I mean, are you serious? And she starts going on about the 14-year-old. 14 years old, her whole fucking life in front of her, this vicious pig, this miserable piece of shit, this tires. Okay, I write down tires. She snuffs the life out of 3 young ladies, and then what does he do? He goes home and crawls back in bed with his new girlfriend like he just got up to take a leak. Can you imagine what a piece of work that stupid bitch? Broken toilet! And I swear on my child's eyes, when she said that, broken toilet, I just about pissed myself. Yeah? Listen to me. The bodies were discovered by Tanya Howard's new boyfriend when he came to the house about 5-6 hours later. And when he came to the, and by the time we got there, Rigger was going pretty good. We found the 14-year-old and Tanya, 28-year-old, in the living room, and we thought that was it. But when I opened the bathroom door, Billy wiped his dry mouth. See, when Curtis Taft lived with Tanya, whenever he would discipline the 4-year-old, he'd always take her into the bathroom. And after he shot her, and that's where he took her that morning. And after he shot her, he stuck her head and shoulders in the toilet. Like I said, rigor had set in, and we couldn't get her out. So we had to use a sledgehammer to break the porcelain. So, broken toilet, the lady said. Don't ask me how. Then what happened? I brought her back to the projects and let her into the murder apartment, see if she could maybe pick something up in the air. Did she? Nope. What did she say when she saw the broken toilet? Just nodded, like, I told you so. Well, she got you on the running water, too, Jimmy said, if you want to get technical about it. That, too, I guess. You write her that letter? I'm working on it. So, power. Okay, now, what Billy discovers that all his retired detective friends, they all have their Curtis Tafts. And then he discovers that 1 or 2 are no longer among the living. And he's worried that in retirement, figuring what the hell, these guys are still torturing me, I'm just going to kill them. He pretty much believes that his best friend, a retired detective who's now a real estate mogul, has killed his wife. And Billy's still a cop. This guy has been his soul brother, his foxhole buddy, since they were 20. And now he's tormented. He doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know whether to push it, start an investigation, or just turn his head and look the other way. And Billy, in his home, Billy lives with his dad, Billy Sr. Billy Sr. has creeping dementia, and but used to be a well-loved chief of police, a chief of patrol in the NYPD. And when Billy talks to his father, who's in retirement, pretty scholarly when he's not out of his mind, when Billy's looking for guidance. What do I do? So this is Billy talking to his father, and he doesn't want to come out and say his best friend's a murderer, and he's still a cop. And we'll call him Billy Sr. and Billy. Back home, Billy headed upstairs to take another shot at sleep, past his father's open bedroom door, and wandered in. Billy Sr. lay on his bed, fully dressed for a change, but snoring lightly flayed sections of the New York Times scattered around him on the bedspread. Taking a seat in the small desk his father had brought with him from his last home, Billy scanned the spines of the books that lined the top shelf. Besides the old man's World War I poets, were luridly written original guides to 19th century New York City, a first-person account of the Civil War draft riots of 1863, William Manchester's Death of a President, and 3 fat novels about Ireland written by Thomas Flanagan, 2 of which Billy had actually read and somewhat enjoyed. "Which is catching your eye?" Billy Sr. murmured from the bed. "Ah, come on, Dad, you know me," Billy blushed. "The dummy act doesn't become you," Sr. said. "I've been telling you that since you were a kid." "You know me," Billy unthinkingly repeated. Then, catching himself, "Must be an echo in here." "What's on your mind?" his father said. "Why does something have to be on my mind for me to come visit?" Billy Sr. quietly waited him out, his eyes unwavering, reducing his son, as in the old days, to a bucket of tells. "Dad, let me give you a hypothetical situation," he began, and faltered. "If you knew a certain friend of yours crossed the line." "Which line?" "The legal line. And you were having a real problem looking the other way." Flat on his back, his father frowned at the ceiling. "Is this friend on the job?" Billy didn't answer, which was answer enough. "How good a friend is he?" "Like a brother." "Then first off, you have to ask yourself what would happen to him." Billy felt his heart lurch, but he wasn't sure in which direction. "No matter what he did?" "It's that bad?" Billy Sr. said. Again, Billy didn't answer. "What are we talking about, murder?" Just some nonsense," Billy said, getting to his feet. "I should sleep." "That was fast," Sr. said. "No, my brain just... Are you all right?" "Yeah, no, I'm great." Billy patted his father's arm, turned, and was halfway out of the room when the old man began talking to him as if he were still seated. "Back in June of 1964, there was a cop in Harlem. I won't say his name. He's passed anyhow. And this individual, he killed someone pretty much in front of his partner." Billy sat back down. "A pimp, had some Indian moniker, Cochise, Cheyenne, Geronimo maybe. They had him in the back of the patrol car, and this pimp, he starts mouthing off. Just wouldn't stop. So this cop, let's call him Johnson. It was at night. He drives over to Morningside Park, drags him out, busts him up bad, and leaves him there to die, which he did. Because the guy was mouthing off? Well, that and because there wasn't a girl in the man's stable over 16, because he had a habit of slashing Achilles tendons when any of them tried to run away from him, because he was so arrogant that he threatened Johnson's family, and yeah, because he wouldn't shut the hell up back there. What happened to him? What happened to who? Johnson. Nothing. He walked away clean? Billy Sr. propped himself up with the second pillow. You have to understand, my son, the summer of '64 was red hot uptown, and this Cochise individual, he had more enemies than a Roman emperor. The squad pretty much went through the motions of looking into it for a few days, but nobody really gave a damn. And then a lieutenant from the 1-9, Tom Gilligan, shot and killed a 15-year-old black kid in the street. And we had almost a week of rioting on our hands, so the pimp was totally forgotten. And Johnson's partner didn't say anything? Billy asked. I can't say what it's like now, but back then, you looked the other way. Always. How about the partner? The witness? What happened to him? The old man was so long in answering that Billy almost repeated the question. Looking back after all those years, his father said, taking his hand, he could have been a better father to his son, maybe, a better husband to his wife, but other than that, looking Billy in the eye now, he sleeps like a rock. I'm so anxious people aren't going to get that he's talking about himself. So, just checking. So, Later that night, Billy's job at night watch, he starts working at 1 a.m. And he and his squad have to respond to all felonies, homicides, ag assaults, rapes in Manhattan because there are no other detective squads on duty in the local precincts. So he goes from one to the other. And because he's a supervisor, he just sends guys out. All right, you cover this thing in Harlem, you cover this thing in Chelsea. And something happened in Harlem, an ag assault. And Billy sent out the youngest, most inexperienced detective in his squad. It was basically a kid named Butter. So Billy's checking up on Butter. Walking into Harlem Hospital at 3 a.m. in order to follow up on ag assault that had come into the office an hour earlier, Billy wandered the halls until he found his point man, Emmett Butter, standing outside one of the ORs, notebook in hand, watching as a trauma team worked on his victim. "So what do you got?" Billy asked. "Beckham is Smalley," Butter reading off his notes. 19, stabbed twice in the chest. "Is he likely?" "Wobbling." "Where did it happen?" They're not sure. They said they were walking on either Lenox or 5th, and all of a sudden 5 or 6 black guys jumped out of a car, stabbed Ismaili, snatched his chain, then took off." "Who's they?" "What?" "They were walking. Who was walking?" "The other Albanians, his buddies. They brought him in." "Can any of them ID the car?" "I don't think so." "Make, color, nothing?" "Apparently not." Billy said. "Guys are walking down the street, middle of the night. 5 or 6 other guys jump out of a car, stab their friend twice, steal his chain, then jump back into the car and take off." "Apparently." "And these friends who brought him here, not one of them knows what street they were on, and nobody can even say what color car it was. Do I have that right?" "Apparently." Butter's staring at the floor now. "What does that sound like to you?" "Like they're selling a story," Butter said. "I agree. So where are these Albanian friends?" "They left." "They left. Did you interview any of them?" "Just as far as I told you. Then I went to check with the doctor, and when I came back out, they were kind of gone." "Kind of gone." "You got their names, though, right?" "I was about to," Butter said, blushing with humiliation then. "I'll put it all in the report." "How about you don't?" Billy said. "What?" "Do everybody a favor, do yourself a favor, and say you got here after they left." "Yeah?" Butter looking at him now with dog's eyes. "But we're clear about what happened in here, yes?" "Yeah, yes. My people get to screw up once." "I understand," Butter said. Then again, "I understand." "All right," Billy said, turning away. "Stay with this Melville, see if he comes around." "Hey, boss," Butter called out. "Thank you." Thinking there was a good chance the kid would screw the pooch on this, his first run, Billy had made sure to wait until something came in north of 96th Street before sending Butter out, knowing that grievously fucking up anywhere south of that, where the press began to give a shit, would have resulted in him being transferred to the ID squad in the morgue, or worse. But if Butter was ever going to be of any use to him or any other squad boss, he had to start cutting his teeth somewhere. His wife, the nurse, would never admit it to him, but Billy's guess was that interns killed patients all the time, and their supervisors, with an eye for the long-term healer to come, mainly looked the other way. Well, it was the same with him. In order for him to get the greater job done, to mold your people as you saw fit and prepare them to effectively do the job in the years to come, you tolerated error. You turned a not quite blind eye to the actions of others and to your own actions. You created secrets and you kept secrets. Out on the street, same thing. Depending on the individual and the situation, sometimes you threw the Thor hammer at a misdemeanor. Other times you let an individual walk who had no right to sleep in his own bed that night. You did all these things and more because as a boss, if you weren't willing to play fast and loose when required, if you weren't willing to make a discreet hash of the rule book now and then, on this job, you might as well call in sick. That's just the way it was. Thank you. All right, this one's really fast, but I won't blur. So it's kind of about an emergency child therapy session, and it's really funny. It should have been funny, Billy thought, but it wasn't. Anytime you get called in to see the school therapist about your child, funny is the last thing on your mind. But still. The day before, his 8-year-old Declan had apparently pushed a kid who had been taunting him face first into the edge of an open locker door. The injury was minimal. They were 8-year-olds after all. But there was a little blood and a broken pair of glasses. And so now, he and his wife Carmen were seated in an empty classroom talking to a young guy who couldn't have been more than a year or two out of school himself, asking whether Declan's birth had been a difficult one, whether they employed any physical form of discipline at home, whether there was any history on either side of their families of, hey, how about we just get Declan to apologize to the kid and we pay for the glasses? Billy amiably cut him off. Those would be appropriate gestures, no doubt, the therapist said, but I think, no. Carmen's sharp voice sounding like a command to a wolf as she thrust herself forward in her chair. Where the hell do you get off asking me about giving birth to him? How dare you ask us if we smack our kids around, if we have crazies in our family? I am a nurse. I am a healer. My husband is a New York City detective. He protects people. This is who we are, and this is what we can't do today because we're stuck having this time suck of a talk with you. Hey, Carmen, Billy said uselessly. And no, my son isn't going to apologize to that little shit. And no, we're not going to pay for those glasses. But you know who should? You and his whole goddamn school, because what happened yesterday is all your fault. You put on this stupid, boring show about the planets. All these poor kids dressed up like silver... I'm cracked. Sorry. You put on this stupid, boring show about the planets. All these poor kids dressed up like silverfoil meatballs. Hello, I am Mercury. Hello, I am Saturn. And you know one poor kid has to come out and say, hello, I am Uranus. Jesus Christ, you're a shrink. Do you know how humiliating that is? And of course he's going to get teased and teased. And if he's got any heart to him like my son has, at some point he's going to push back. The therapist, more bemused than intimidated, looked down at his notepad, reached for his pen, then thought better of it. And if you people try to suspend him or to even do so much as lift a finger to discipline, we're going to go first to our lawyer and then to the papers. And how stupid will your science teachers look when the story gets out? Don't they watch the news? Uranus isn't even a planet anymore. With that, she got up and walked out, leaving Billy to placate. I didn't actually see the play, Billy said mildly. But she's kind of got a point. By the way, I just have to say, that last part I read about the school shrink, that was my shrink's favorite part of the book. So sorry. Oh, yeah, so listen, before you ask any questions, let me just do a preemptive strike. Why Harry Brandt? Well, in the beginning, I thought I was going to be writing a slick, tight urban thriller, and it was going to be lean and mean. It's going to take me 6 months. Then I started writing, and it turned into a typical Richard Price 4-year book. And by the time I realized I didn't want a pen name, it was too late. And so I wish I didn't have a pen name after all is said and done. So I hope that answers all your pen name questions. So, do we do an S thing with the microphone here?
We've got mics on either side.
Sure. What the hell, Richard? In your New York Times book review interview, you mentioned a debt to Lenny Bruce. Care to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I did say Lenny Bruce was one of my literary inspirations, simply because there was something in the rhythm of his routines that was sort of like counterculture. What I said was counterculture meets Catskills. And I loved his free style of free association, but not quite free association. He figured out all the similes and metaphors, all the cultural pluckings. And, I mean, that's the way I was talking in the playground. And for years, when I saw it in print as a transcript of Lenny Bruce's routines, I said, yep, that's it. And he was just sort of one of my, my wife tells, well, never mind, I won't say that part. Sorry. But, it's basically, okay. And it just became important to me that Lenny Bruce's Spritz, it was like a recognition. That combined with Last Exit to Brooklyn, which I read when I was 18 or 17 and 18. I read them when I was very young. And that book married social realism to bebop. And he was writing about the darkest urban subject, but it was like with a saxophone he was writing. And just the sheer jazz of his prose just lifted all this awful urban crap off the page. And I had loved social realism mainly because what you see is what you get when I was younger. But I didn't want to write that sort of Christ in concrete kind of style. And Last Exit to Brooklyn showed me a way out because I loved social realism, but I didn't want to be a social realist. So those are my two guys.
How do you plot your stories? Do you storyboard?
No, but storyboarding is a great idea. No, I'm interested in an area, or like a Lower East Side or Harlem, or like a small industrial city like Jersey City, and that's all I know at the time. And I don't know why I'm drawn to that, but that's where I want to be, and I don't know what my story is. And so I started hanging out there, and I might be there a year or 2 years, but at some point, something's going to happen while I'm doing my hang time with cops, with the people that the cops serve, the people that just live in the same areas where the cops are serving, and the cops themselves, from their point of view. And I just hang with everybody, and then something happens. And it's the key. If I follow this, and it's usually a crime, and if I follow the investigation of this crime, and investigations are chronological and very orderly, if I follow this investigation through this messy panorama of the Lower East Side, of Harlem, of Jersey City, this investigation will automatically give me a spine that I will adhere to so I can pull in all the disparate cultures and peoples that I want to write about. That's a fact. Whatever.
Let him go. I was going to wait and ask you this afterwards, but nobody seems to be raging to ask questions. I really loved your first 4 books, man.
What happened to
growing
you,
up in Alphabet City? No, I really did. The Wanderers, about the gang. It was a mediocre movie, great book. The Breaks, about the electrician's kid who, I have nightmares now because I have diabetes, and I think of the old Jewish guy with no arms and legs who goes, "Why you have this job, Sonny? It's for the niggers." I love that book, and I love the one about Simon Strait.
Such a beautiful line.
I think, no, listen. And I love Ladies' Man. This is not, you'll probably want to punch me, but I've never, and it doesn't matter because I'm just some loser here, but I have never been able to get through the other stuff. I feel like you're a lot like Peter Blauner, and I'm wondering, why don't you go back to the original stuff? If you did a sequel of that pathetic creature in Ladies' Man, that is the greatest novel ever written. I didn't realize, when I read it at 18, I didn't understand. When I went into Alcoholics Anonymous, I met all these pathetic losers trying to get laid, and I understood. Mr. Price, you should go back to it. I mean, I'm sorry. I tried to read Lush Life recently, and I gave it up, and I went back to reading about the Breaks, and the father who's like twisting the kid's arm, saying, "Become an electrician, you little loser." Of course he was right. We know this from the. Anyway, I just wanted to say that. And
duly noted. I'll answer you. Actually, I have an answer. Those first 4 books were written by a guy in his 20s who didn't have a lot of reflection and thought the only thing he could ever write was himself. And so all of a sudden I'm 32 and I'm wrote out. I'm in a corner writing about my shoelaces. I didn't have anything else to write about. And then I spent 8 years, and I quit. I spent 8 years of living and I had kids, and I got married, and I was a drug addict, and then I wasn't a drug addict, and I started hanging out with people that I never hung out with before, and I learned that there's a whole world out there that you can learn about, and that's you too. All you got to do is have empathy and an eye and sympathy and be a witness. And it opened up a whole new world to me of doorstopper books, you know?
Yeah.
And if you don't like the books, you can just bench press them, you know?
But I read a lot, and I read your first 4 books every 18 months, and I just want you to know that. So, and like every other loser, I've tried to imitate your style, but you're really good. Thanks a lot.
All right, you're welcome.
Hard act to follow.
Yeah.
I'm going to go a little different direction, Richard. I think you're the greatest American writer today. And the reason I say that is your last name, which is Price, and my last name happens to be Price.
Well,
so
I think my name originally was Press. It got changed in Ellis Island. But I'll go with Price.
Okay, if you did. Not only the novelist, but then, of course, you have the screenplays, and which is, I assume, more, both kind of more solitary. And then suddenly you wind up with Dennis Lehane and George Pelecanos and David Simon and this great thing. So just a little bit about how you shift gears when you're doing that. I mean, it's great because you're doing all this different kind of writing, but I'm assuming the mindset is somewhat different, or maybe it's not. So talk a little bit about that.
It's different to the extent it's writing pilots and screenplays. It's a different medium. You can't write like a novelist there. You'll die. Right. They'll kill you. When I was asked to write my first screenplay by a producer, I said, I don't know how to write screenplays. He said, well, it's like a play. Just give me the first 10 minutes, how you see the movie. And I gave him 90 pages, and I hadn't introduced the main characters yet. And he goes, yep. And I learned to write screenplays by going to the movies and none of these like screenplay classes and none of these rules. And, in the second act, the third act has to go up the butt of the first act. I just like relaxed and just went to movies and tried to see the movie on a page as I was watching it. And I made a lot of errors, a lot of false starts, but I just had to unlearn so much as a novelist, and when I did, I got it. And once I stopped bitching about, what monsters Hollywood assholes are, I relaxed, and I wrote better screenplays, and I learned not to bite the hand that feeds me because, they'll bite you right back there and you'll be on welfare. But I see a complete division of labor. I always say this, I don't know there's got to be less than a dozen American novelists out there that aren't brand names like Stephen King or Michael Connelly that don't need a second job. And it could be teaching, it could be, doing what I do, writing screenplays and TV. You can't live off royalties, unless you're a blowout Gone Girl bestseller guy. And right. I'll never be. However, and I just learned, one for them, one for me. And it's not like when I say one for them, it's like I'm just tossing it off, right. And feeling snotty about it. It's my writing. My name's on it. I'm going to do the very best job I can. But I steel myself to realize it's not a book. I can't control it. And if it doesn't work, it's because there's some downturn, some movie so vaguely like this bombed. And all of a sudden, all movies vaguely like that are dead in the water. Or like they once told me when I had a CBS show, they called me up mid-season. It was 13 episodes, and they called me up mid-season. And it was a drama about rookies in Harlem. And they said, the mandate came down from CBS on high and said, no more dramas. CBS does not want dramas. All dramas have to turn into action series. So you take your money and run.
Yeah.
And then you write your novel.
Right.
So endeth the story.
Use a journalist prerogative or ex-journalist prerogative. One follow-up question. You didn't answer all the questions on Harry Brandt. Why Harry Brandt? Why that particular name?
I'll tell you why that name. I think I answered why I picked the name.
Right.
But Harry was just a knockabout name from my childhood, working class, Jewish, Italian, Irish neighborhood. And Brandt was in honor of my first agent, Carl Brandt,
Okay.
who took me on as a 22-year-old in 1972 and stayed with me till I was 40. I can't do the math.
Right.
And he just took me on like my Gentile father that I never had. And he had a big square jaw and Long Island accent, Long Island lockjaw accent, which is, like the guy on Gilligan's Island, The Millionaire. And he just, I was part of his family, and he passed away in 2013. So I just wanted to pick that name as a shout out to him.
Thank you.
I loved your book. I read it. I couldn't put it down like your others. I read it in a day and a half. Billy is a sympathetic hero, I think.
Hope so.
Yeah, I really liked him. But your story is shadowing a lot of dishonesty and immoral behavior, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering, as someone who works a lot in struggling communities, or that's what you write about, and the police, if the incidents we've been seeing in Ferguson and New York were surprising to you, the shooting of black. I mean, is that familiar to you?
It was stunning and like, oh my God, what happened here? And oh my God, another one. I think that shit's been going on for 100 years. And I'm not indicting the police, and I'm not saying every victim, was martyred. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of complexity. But as of Rodney King, you got that cell phone, and everything becomes national so fast and spreads like wildfire. And whether right or wrong, everybody is a newscaster as long as they have a cell phone. And everybody is, the cops are feeling like, don't do this, there's cell phones. And the guys that they stop feel like, I'm being filmed, and sometimes it gets more explosive. But the fact that it's a phenomenon, I think it's been going on since the day somebody invented blue uniforms and poor people. Mm-hmm. And it just so happens we have electronic craze, instant. I mean, it's like Tahrir Square or the Arab Spring. It happens. It's all over the world. In my neighborhood, I live on Fifth Avenue and Upper Fifth Avenue, I should say, in Harlem, and they're cops, and there was these young cops, and they pulled over a red Humvee, and I don't know what the guy did, but they pulled it over. This tall, youngish black guy comes out, and he's wearing a red jumpsuit that matches the Humvee. And the minute he's out there, he's going, he's been profiled. He didn't do anything. I don't know why they pulled him over. But the minute he opened his mouth and started, yelling at the cops, 5 people on the street automatically went like this. Mm-hmm. And the cops are looking there, and the guy's looking. I don't know why they pulled him over. But, you had him on 5 televisions there. So that's what's new, is how fast it can spread and be documented. Everything else is old.
Okay, thanks.
Another question about names. I hope I have this right, but I think one of your characters' names is the name of your father. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, the psychopath.
I was going to ask why.
Because, and my father was a really good guy, and his name was Milton Price. And so I had a half Jewish, half Puerto Rican detective who's also like a sociopath. So I called him Milton Ramos. A little psychopathic shout out to my good guy dad.
Okay.
What can I tell you?
Thank you. Fodder for your therapist, no doubt.
Listen, my pen name could have been John Milton,
One of the things that I really like about the book and your other books as well is that that it seems like there's a determinism that underlies the characters, that their choices are limited and we see them struggling. But I don't know if that's just me reading that into the books or...
I'm not sure.
Yeah?
You have to give me an example.
Well, like Milton Ramos, he's struggling with whether to commit these revenge activities and.
Okay, I know
But-
what you mean.
yeah,
And basically, the more messed up, morally messed up and conflicted a character is, I think the more interesting he is. I mean, anybody could have created a stock villain, but the whole point is to make you sympathetic that this guy wasn't born, with a baton in his hand. Circumstances have curdled him in a certain way. And for Billy and the moral dilemma, listen, it's murder. You're a policeman. These are his buddies. These are his foxhole buddies. They saved each other's lives. They've taken in each other's children in times of crisis. It's a jam. And it's not like he's a good guy, but he's never encountered something like this. And you'd think it's obvious what to do, but it's not obvious to me if I was him.
They might enjoy hearing about The Wire before it was The Wire. My friends did Hill Street Blues from the previous series is before Hill Street got to the screen.
Oh.
So I know that whole screenwriting
Yeah.
world. They might enjoy how does it get, and what does David Simon bring to the
I don't
table?
know. I wasn't a student of, cable shows, like police shows that were popular, like Hill Street Blues. I just started watching The Wire for the first 2 years, and I got sucked in like everybody else. In the third year, David Simon came by when I was doing a reading at Politics and Prose, and with George Pelicanos, and they said, "Do you want to write for The Wire?" And I know that Simon picked a lot of things in clockers for the first year of The Wire. We had known each other at that time. And I was just terrified that these guys thought I was this expert on crime and punishment and how the cops work and how the courts work. And I put everything I had into clockers, and I was so freaked out that they thought I had so much left, in the vault. And I had one piece of dried macaroni and an old Minnie Minoso baseball card, and so I went in. They thought I was just going to knock it out. I did so much homework to write my first episode of The Wire. And they said, "Yeah, I knew you had that." So.
Was that your first attempt at screenwriting?
No, in 1982, for NBC, and a guy named Don Ohlmeyer, whose best friend was O.J. Simpson, he wanted to do a series about Philadelphia in the 1960s, and it's called The Camelot Years. And it's about a bunch of 18-year-olds following them from the early 60s, American Bandstand, and a black guy with a conch, and, just being everybody slick in the street, and this kid wants to be Dion, and this kid wants to be, Billy D. Williams, following them to the point in time where 6 years later, none of them are going to recognize themselves in the mirror compared to who they were. And it was a great idea. And I wrote the pilot, and I thought, that's it. Next thing I know, that wasn't it. So endeth that story.
Okay. A couple of questions. One, did you grow up on the street? Did you interact with police on the street? Did it affect you later on as a writer? Did it affect you later on as a writer? And are some of the characters based on people you knew when you were younger?
No, listen. I was a member of the Goldberg gang. We'd walk down the street, and the Italian kids would go, "Oh, here comes the Goldberg gang. Big deal. What are they going to do, algebra?" Yeah, I went to public schools, and I grew up in a public housing project. But at that time, the public housing projects were solid working class. They were racially mixed. Everybody played in the same playgrounds, went to the same public school. It was the 1950s and 60s. And I was a good kid. And all my friends, more or less, were good kids, except for Howard Lobel here. And a lot of us went to Bronx High School of Science, and I didn't hang out with the tougher kids because they freaked me out.
Which one's Howard Lobel?
Yeah. He'll be signing books, too, later. So, I had no truck with cops. I didn't even know what a cop was. I never even saw a cop unless, a cop car went by. But it wasn't a project where police were around. One of my friend's fathers was a repair mechanic for the police department. That's as close as I ever came to knowing a cop. It was just later, in the late 80s, when I had to write Sea of Love. I had to write Sea of Love. I wrote Sea of Love. And I had to do ride-alongs with cops that I discovered cops. And I didn't have fantasies when I was a little kid. I want to be a policeman. Like, I want to be, a cowboy. And once I was running with cops, I saw things that I could never see if I wasn't with cops. And they were kind of my portal to this whole world where I'd never be able to set foot. And that's when I became interested in cops. And like I said, a lot of it was, just take me along on this carpet ride into experience.
Thank you.
That's me.
I think we'll take one more question.
Hi.
Or two more. We can do two more.
Yeah, this is a horrible question.
Nice intro.
I got accepted into every single Catholic high school in the Bronx, except the Bronx High School of Science.
Well, that's not a Catholic school.
I know. And my alcoholic, racist uncle told me that's because they don't let Catholic kids in the Bronx High School of Science. And my mother screamed at him. She screamed at everybody. She told me, "You didn't get in because you weren't good enough to get in." And I just want to know, when you were there any Catholic kids in Bronx High School of Science?
Well, I know the two Puerto Rican kids were Catholic.
Okay.
Yeah, look, I hung out with the bowling team, and
Neil Clendenin, who was the president when you were there.
And he went to Wesleyan.
Yeah.
What about him?
He certainly wasn't. He wasn't a Jewish guy, if I remember correctly.
I doubt he was Catholic too. I mean, he was black. It was probably some variation of Protestant. But it's just an exam. It was a Board of Education exam. You passed the exam, you were in. There was a cutoff point, and you got in or you didn't. And there were Catholic kids, there were Irish kids, there were Italian kids, there were Polish and German kids.
Okay.
But basically, it was a Jewish.
That makes me feel better, I think.
No, it was a Jewish conspiracy school, but yeah. I mean,
okay.
We let in just enough cosmetically, so we couldn't be accused. But
well, I couldn't get in, and then we moved to Delaware, and everything went downhill from there.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry.
I love your books, by the way.
Thank you.
The last question. In the Washington Post article that was referenced earlier, one thing of a number of things stood out for me, and it's your practice of filling a lot of notebooks before you start writing, but then never looking at them again while you're writing. Is that indeed a true account from the Post? And
listen, every once in a while, I couldn't remember when I went to hang out with the Harlem funeral director, and he had that cosmetics cart. I couldn't remember everything that was on the cart. And so I dig for an hour through stenographer notebooks. Did I write forward? Did I write backward? And I could never find the cosmetics cart. And guess what? It's fiction. So guess what? I made stuff up. But it was important to me. I like reporting my novels. I love reporting my novels. I love learning and turning that learning. But at the end of the day, you could have 1,000 stenographer books. It's just like a pyramid of paper. You got to make a shapely allegory and a story out of all those observations. An observation is not a story. So, and that's, every once in a while,
how many books do you have at home? How many, do you stack them up? Do you know where they are?
They're in archive boxes.
Yeah.
I'll never look at them either.
Thanks.
Okay? Thank you.